Hey, tonight, we're pulling back the velvet curtain on a role history rarely whispers about. The male concubine. Behind palace walls, beyond the perfume and politics, existed a life of comfort, control, and quiet despair. A life you probably wouldn't survive a week in, let alone live. Before we slip into silk robes and moral ambiguity, take a second to like the video and subscribe. But only if you find this kind of insomnia-fueled historical descent oddly soothing. And let me know in the comments, what time is it where you are? And would you rather live in a muddy field or a golden cage? No wrong answers, just different flavours of suffering. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a soft fan or some white noise, and let's drift together into a world of velvet walls, locked doors, and very complicated emotions. Congratulations, you've just woken up in the past, again. Only this time, you're not a starving peasant trudging through mud with a half-frozen goat. You're in silk sheets, on purpose. But don't get excited. You're not royalty. You're not even a servant. You're a possession. Expensive, exotic, and absolutely replaceable. You're a male concubine? Property of the court? An ornament in the imperial bedroom? A soft-spoken shadow in someone else's fantasy? You don't know what day it is. That's not your job. Time is something other people track. You measure life by glances, gestures, and how much your smile hurts by the end of the night. The world outside the palace might be starving or revolting or celebrating a festival in your honour. You wouldn't know, or care, or be allowed to care. Your name? Irrelevant. Maybe you had one before. Something your mother whispered to you in a dusty corner of your childhood before you were taken, or sold, or given up for opportunity. But now you're called something softer. Something that sounds like affection, but really just translates to owned. You were young, that's important. Or rather, was important. Age is currency here, and yours is devaluing every second. Too young, and you're unsettling. Too old, and you're invisible. Right now, you hover in the profitable window of delicate cheekbones and barely defined muscle. Just enough presence to be desired, not enough to be threatening. You look in the polished bronze mirror, not for vanity, but for survival. One wrong hair, one blemish, one sag in posture, and you're no longer the Emperor's favourite indulgence. You're just inventory. Dusty stock, waiting to be forgotten behind someone newer, smoother, more compliant. You weren't always here. Maybe you were a son of a poor farmer, caught in a raid. Maybe you were tribute from a conquered kingdom, a gift with skin. Maybe your family saw your beauty and knew it was your only ticket out of the mud. In any case, your body entered this life before your mind did, and your mind still hasn't caught up. You were trained, of course. You don't just fall into concubinage, like a clumsy waiter. There were classes, sort of, less books, more people pointing at your posture and saying, "Stop breathing like a soldier." You learned how to pour tea without splashing, how to dance without shaking, how to look both submissive and alluring. A very complicated expression that usually just feels like smiling through indigestion. And speaking. You learned how not to speak. Silence is your ally, your mystery, your brand. A male concubine who talks too much becomes a novelty, a risk, or worse, remembered for the wrong reason. So now you speak only when asked. You smile on cue. You walk like the floor is watching. And your eyes are always doing something, listening, pleading, teasing. It doesn't matter what you feel, only what you project. Behind your eyes, of course, is a person. Kind of. A fractured thing. Someone who used to want things. Love, laughter, a family. Someone who thought beauty was a gift, not a cage. That part of you is still there. You can feel him sometimes, pacing in the back of your skull like a prisoner who knows the door is fake. You don't let him out, because you can't want things here. Wanting is dangerous. Wanting leads to questions. Questions lead to defiance. And defiance gets punished. You've seen it happen. You've seen boys brought in who still thought they were people, who thought they could say no, or cry, or demand to be touched with care. Some were broken quietly, reassigned to the laundry rooms or kitchens, their skin still flawless, but their spirits bent at an ugly angle. Others just disappeared. No ceremony. No farewell. One day they were brushing your hair. The next, their bed was made and cold. No one talks about it. But everyone remembers. You've lasted this long because you've perfected the art of invisible obedience. You don't resist. You don't yearn. You simply exist, beautifully, predictably, like a candle, flickering just enough to be interesting, but never enough to threaten fire. And yes, you're a man, or at least you were supposed to be, male, biologically speaking. But in this role, masculinity is sculpted and then sanded away. You're not expected to be strong, or loud, or brave. You're not a warrior. You're not a builder. You're not a father. You're something else entirely. A dream with no spine. Your masculinity is curated, aesthetic, barely legal, just enough to intrigue, not enough to offend. If you're too masculine, you become dangerous, a rival, a threat, a challenger. If you're too feminine, you're dismissed. Not exotic enough, not rare enough, not confusing enough to hold attention. So you live in a delicate balancing act, your voice trained to hover between warmth and whisper, your movements choreographed to suggest grace without flamboyance. Your strength, when you're allowed to show it, must come in the form of restraint, holding a pose for hours, keeping a secret until your jaw aches. Some of the older ones still whisper about escape. They remember the world before the palace, and they speak of it like a forbidden poem. Mountains, trees. Lovers who looked at you like a person, not a poem. But most of them stop talking about it eventually. Or they're sent away. You don't ask where. You already know. And yet, despite all this, despite the objectification, the humiliation, the soul-grinding performance, you're not unhappy. Not all the time. You're fed, bathed, admired, feared in your own quiet way. Compared to the fields or the mines or the army, you are pampered. Precious. And pampering is addictive. The silk against your skin, the weight of gold around your neck, the scent of jasmine on your wrist. These are comforts, and comfort is the cruelest sedative of all. You stop dreaming of freedom, because freedom starts to smell like dirt and sweat and being cold at night. Better to be someone's possession in a warm room than your own master in the dark. You didn't choose this life, but now it fits like a tailored lie. The kind that drapes well, smooth against the skin, constricting around the throat. When people think of concubines, they imagine women, gauzy veils, soft music, faint sighs behind paper screens. But male concubinage? That's a different mythology altogether. More hush, more scandal, more we don't talk about that at court. You're an open secret, a living contradiction, praised in poetry, erased from history. Your presence is tolerated, even treasured, but never truly acknowledged. Not in public, not in the official records. You're the secret flourish in a monarch's diary, a shadow stitched into silk. And no matter the empire, whether it's a Ming palace, an Ottoman seraglio, a Persian court, or some smaller forgotten kingdom with just enough ambition and excess, your story stays the same. You're brought in through the back gate, catalogued like a rare animal, and tucked away where the sun only reaches in filtered fragments. You share your space with others, of course. The harem, or its equivalent, is a kingdom of its own, ruled not by sword or law, but by glances, whispers, and extremely passive-aggressive embroidery. You and the others live in a curated terrarium, a place where beauty is the ecosystem and power is pollinated in silence. And your fellow concubines? They are not your friends. You share laughter, meals, stolen gossip, and secret glances, but never trust. Trust gets you gutted, metaphorically or otherwise. There are favourites, there are informants, there are those who would slip herbs in your tea to dull your shine, bruise your charm, ruin your chance at being summoned that night. Yes, summoned. Because that's how it works. You don't choose, you're chosen. A eunuch or attendant arrives at dusk, unreadable expression carved into their face, like they forgot how to feel emotions 10 years ago. They bow, they say your number, or your nickname, or occasionally nothing at all, just a tilt of the head, and you go. You bathe again, even if you bathed already. You perfume, you polish, you prepare. Not for sex, not exactly, but for theatre, for performance, for proximity to the only kind of power you'll ever touch. And when you arrive in the Emperor's chamber, or the Sultan's, or the King's, or the Caliph's, it's not always what you expect. Sometimes it's passion, other times it's just silence. Sometimes they want poetry, sometimes they want tears, sometimes they just want someone to hold and pretend they aren't utterly alone beneath 10,000 tons of political weight. You are whatever they need you to be. A warm body, a gentle voice, a comforting lie. And afterward, you're dismissed. No pillow talk, no breakfast, no eye contact the next morning unless summoned again. Sometimes they forget your name, or call you by someone else's. You smile anyway. Correcting a ruler is inadvisable. But here's the thing they don't tell you. The real intimacy, the rawest exposure, doesn't happen in bed. It happens in the quiet before. When you're standing in the hallway, heart in your throat, wondering if this will be the night you rise, or the night you vanish. It happens in the mirror, when you catch yourself rehearsing how much of your soul to show. It happens when you realise you no longer remember what your real voice sounds like, the one you had before the whispers took over. And the fear. Oh, the fear is a masterpiece. Not dramatic, not loud, just always there, like a draft under the door, or the smell of something rotting that you can't quite locate. You don't fear death, exactly. Death is simple, clean. You fear being forgotten while still alive, being replaced while still breathing, being kept but not wanted, seen but not chosen. You've heard the stories. A concubine who grew too bold, one who whispered a political opinion, one who loved too fiercely or cried too loudly or dared to ask for something small like a book. Some are demoted, moved to a lower room, fewer servants, less food. Some fall sick and never recover. Some fall down stairs that no one remembers seeing. Some just fall, but not you. Not yet. You're still useful, still beautiful, still mysterious in the right way. You know how to walk the edge of intrigue without toppling into threat. You know which eunuch to flatter, which wife to avoid, which concubine will sell you out for half a fig. You're not naive, but you're not dead inside either. Not fully, not always. Sometimes you hum to yourself when no one's around. Songs from your childhood, broken at the ends. Sometimes you dream of the sea, even though you've never seen it. You think maybe it smells like the perfume the older concubine wore, the one with silver in his hair, and the saddest smile you've ever seen. He used to talk about the ocean, said it was too big to be owned. That's why they got rid of him. You still keep the comb he gave you. It's hidden behind a loose panel under your sleeping mat. You touch it once in a while, just to remember that you once had a moment of real kindness that didn't cost you anything. That's your identity now. A constellation of tiny hidden rebellions. A half-remembered name. A comb in a crack in the floor. A humming throat. A scar on your hip that no one's allowed to see. You don't know what you are anymore? Man? Ornament? Ghost? You're not allowed to be a full human here. That's too complicated. Too unpredictable. So you become a fragment. A curated version of yourself. A slideshow of gestures and perfect angles. And the people who rule over you? They pretend you're free. That you chose this. That you enjoy the palace, the food, the silks, the privileges. And in a way, you do. You enjoy surviving. You enjoy being looked at with desire instead of disgust. You enjoy the illusion of control, of knowing that your fate depends on your performance, and not just random cruelty. But deep down, you know that isn't true. You're a pet with pearls, a bird in a diamond cage, the most elegant kind of prisoner. And one day, they'll stop looking at you. There's a moment, it always comes, when you realise you've been replaced. It doesn't happen with a grand announcement, no trumpet, no dramatic finger snap, no eunuch marches in and says, "Congratulations, your time as a living jewel is now officially over." No, it's subtler than that. You just stop being summoned. At first you think nothing of it. Maybe the emperor is travelling. Maybe there's a war. Maybe his gout flared up and he's not in the mood for poetry and skin. But then it's been a week, then 2, then 3. Your name fades from the gossip circle. Your slippers don't disappear from outside your door at night. No perfumes are laid out for you anymore. The younger ones stop bowing quite as low. The eunuchs, once slightly nervous around your presence, now meet your eyes with soft detachment. They nod, polite, mechanical. They've seen this before. They'll see it again. You're just one pearl in a necklace that's always being restrung. And that's when it begins to dawn on you. The slow, cold truth that melts down your spine and settles in your stomach like a dying coal. You're not special. You never were, even when they said you were the favourite. Even when they wrote you into poems or painted your silhouette on porcelain. Even when they pressed their lips to yours and whispered how your voice quieted the storms in their mind. You weren't being seen. You were being consumed. Now, you're still beautiful. Of course. But beauty here is a perishable asset. The kind that begins to rot the second it peaks. You're now in the category of formerly radiant. Still presentable enough to be brought out for nostalgic ceremonies, but not dazzling enough to steal the spotlight. They move you to a smaller room. Quietly. Your things are already packed when you return from morning prayers. Someone else is in your old bed by nightfall. Younger, silkier, smoother. The scent of sandalwood lingers in the sheets, but it's not your sandalwood anymore. You try not to notice. You try to focus on the rhythm of the palace, the meals, the rituals, the endless ceremonies where you're now merely ornamental background. You still wear silk, but it's duller now. Less embroidery. The thread count of your worth has dropped. You try to hold your head high, like the old ones taught you. Grace, even in exile. Dignity, even in disappearance. But it's hard. You begin to notice the silence, the way no one looks for you in the mornings, how your name is never included in the guest list for performances, how during the spring poetry contest your scroll is placed last, not because of alphabetical order, but because no one expects to reach that far down the stack. You still exist, but it feels optional. And then comes the hardest part, the one no one prepares you for. Freedom. They offer it like a blessing. A soft-voiced eunuch knocks at your door one humid evening and tells you the court is moving in a new direction. They speak of retirement like it's a reward. You've served with grace, they say. Your time has come. You may leave the palace. Leave. The word hits like a misplaced dagger. You nod, you smile, you bow deeply, all the movements you've practiced to perfection. But your ears are ringing. Your heartbeat has no rhythm. You stand there, numb, as they hand you a satchel of coin, a letter of release, and a soft pair of shoes meant for walking on foreign ground. You ask nothing, because you know better. What's there to ask, anyway? Can I stay? No. Can I be something else? No. Can I go back to who I was before? Absolutely not. You were someone's luxury for too long. That kind of life leaves marks. So you walk. Or you're escorted, depending on the regime, the mood, the whim. Maybe they arrange a quiet departure. Or maybe they send you off during a festival, when no one will notice the absence. And then you're outside. You feel the sky, all of it for the first time in years. There's no silk canopy above your head, no perfumed haze between you and the moon, just open air, crisp, indifferent. Unaware that you were once a whisper away from royalty. You don't know where to go. The city is a blur, loud, pungent, chaotic. You've lived inside orchestras of etiquette for so long that even normal conversation sounds violent. You stumble through the market. You flinch at laughter. You forget how to make decisions. People look at you, not with desire, with curiosity. You're too clean, too quiet, too soft-handed. You don't belong here. Not yet. And now you must decide. Will you vanish into the alleys? Open a tea shop, live a small, invisible life in the shadow of your former glow? Will you return to your homeland, if it still exists? If your parents are still alive? If your language still lives in your mouth without stuttering? Or will you fall into someone else's harem? Someone else's version of royal loneliness? Because here's the thing they don't tell you. When they paint you in gold and drape you in jasmine, you never learn how to be a person again. Not really. You learned how to be desired, how to be seen, how to be needed in a way that never asked for your thoughts or fears. You learned how to vanish behind beauty. You never learned how to be you. And the world, unfortunately, is not built to teach that gently. You'll be too soft for labour. Too quiet for politics, too mysterious for common life, too stained for noble society. So maybe you'll drift, from city to city, from lover to patron to friend to nobody, and maybe, if you're lucky, you'll meet someone who doesn't want you to perform, someone who lets you speak clumsily, sleep unposed, cry without choreography. Or maybe you won't. Maybe your story ends in a rented room with a cracked teacup and a quiet window, watching rain fall on a street that doesn't know your name. But you'll remember the comb, the sea, the scent of sandalwood, the moment someone once looked at you like you were the centre of the world. Even if it was a lie, that was the lie you lived inside. And sometimes lies are the warmest places we ever sleep. Welcome to your world. Not the world, mind you. Your world. Because a male concubine doesn't live in the world. He lives in a bubble. A cage with curtains. A sanctum built not for freedom but for curation. It starts with the walls. Always the walls. High, smooth, and intimidatingly silent. Thick enough to block sound, gossip, and any dreams of escape. The architecture of containment perfected. The outside world could be burning. Plague, rebellion. A new dynasty clawing its way to power. And inside, you'd be folding a silk robe with creases so precise they could be measured in size. You don't see the city. Not really. At best, a glimpse from a carved wooden lattice. A slice of sky sliced thinner than a whisper. You're told it's safer this way. That a world out there is rough, brutal, teeming with mud, men, and unfiltered sunlight. But the truth is simpler. Out there, you're just a man. In here, you're a myth. The layout of your palace, or harem, or private residence, or gentleman's sanctuary, depending on what century and empire we're currently inside, is designed like a painting. Every hallway leads to softness. Every doorway opens to a curated view. A garden, a fountain, a tapestry of stalks flying toward a sunset no one's allowed to actually see. Everything is beautiful, but nothing is yours. The bed you sleep in? Not yours. The silk robe folded at the end of it? Not yours. The room, the window, the carefully arranged bowl of persimmons you're not allowed to touch without permission? None of it belongs to you. Even your reflection in the polished bronze mirror, framed by inlaid jade and mother of pearl, feels like a loan from someone else. You live surrounded by beauty, but you're never allowed to relax inside it. Because beauty here is not about comfort. It's about presentation. Your chamber is meticulously maintained by servants who barely look at you. They sweep past you like wind, eyes cast down, hands always folding, dusting, adjusting. You could scream, and they'd keep folding the bedding, like your noise was part of the room's acoustics. Your furniture is low, elegant, impractical. A chaise lounge designed for reclining in exactly one seductive pose, and absolutely nothing else. A tea table so delicate it threatens to collapse under the weight of your despair. Screens painted with brush strokes so perfect you forget they're just there to hide the drafts, and sometimes to hide you. And then there's the bath. The bath. A sacred space. Not for hygiene, not really, but for ritual. You bathe because someone might look at you, might touch you, might want you. And every inch of you must be ready. Your skin must be soft enough to forgive. Your scent must linger like a remembered secret. The bathwater is warm, perfumed, and poured by someone who's been told not to make eye contact. You sit in it like a pearl in soup. You don't splash, you don't sink. You soak. Sometimes you hum, but only if you're sure no one will hear. The tiles are cool beneath you. The steam curls around your wrists like forgotten affection. And you are alone. Always alone. Not in terms of bodies. There are always people nearby, brushing your hair, arranging your cuffs, walking 10 paces behind you in case your existence becomes inconvenient. But alone in the way that no one really talks to you. They speak around you, through you, at you, but not with you. Conversation here is dangerous. Words are currency, and yours are heavily taxed. You learn to speak in glances, in carefully timed breaths. You become fluent in implication. Sometimes you're summoned to join the others. the rest of the concubines. Not to socialise, to decorate a room. You sit together in a circle that's not quite a circle. Everyone radiates stillness like trained cats. No one slouches. No one fidgets. You sip tea and pretend not to notice that everyone's assessing everyone else's posture, complexion, mood. Everyone is watching. Everyone is pretending not to. Your daily routine is a blend of waiting and polishing. You wake before the sun, not to greet it, but to ensure you're presentable when the sun greets you. You are bathed, powdered, styled. Even when you're not scheduled to be seen, especially then, because surprise inspections happen. Sometimes by a royal wife looking to exert her rank. Sometimes by a high official trying to decide which of you might be leveraged as a gift or threat. And sometimes, though never spoken aloud, by palace guards who have been bribed with glimpses they're not supposed to see. You are a statue that breathes, a perfume bottle with a pulse. And if you think, just for a moment, that maybe today you'll go outside, you won't. The outdoors exists, yes, technically. You can see a courtyard through the lattice. You know there's a garden beyond the screen with the lotus embroidery. You hear the breeze flirt with bamboo just out of reach. But you? You walk in circles. Perfect circles. Around your room. Around your role. Freedom is theoretical. Your diet is controlled. Not for your health, for your appearance. You're given delicacies meant to maintain your skin tone, your scent, your figure. Honey water for your throat. Melon for your breath. A sliver of steamed fish once a day, flavoured with herbs that cost more than your entire village. You're allowed to eat, but never too much. Not enough to bloat, never enough to bulk. A soft belly is cute on a prince, not on his ornament. You've memorised the names of every dish you've never asked for. You've learned to chew slowly, to swallow without sound, to smile faintly between bites, as if to say, yes, I'm grateful for being given the right amount of hunger today. Because even hunger is curated. Sometimes you're permitted a walk through the garden. That word implies freedom, sunlight, birdsong. This is not that. This garden is a painting you happen to be allowed to step inside. Gravel paths raked to mathematical precision. Ponds more reflective than water has any right to be. Trees trimmed into obedience. Blossoms placed with military discipline. You don't touch anything. You float through it, ideally with the grace of someone whose feet have never known dirt. Your sandals leave no trace. That's the goal. You exist here, but you must never leave evidence of your passage. And you're not alone. Not really. There are always watchers. Eunuchs with blank faces. Attendants with eyes like still water. Wide, flat, unreadable. Some watch for protection. Others for protocol. Most because they were told to, and have learned that looking away is dangerous. Privacy in your world is a rumour. A luxury reserved for the powerful. You're visible, constantly. That's the point. You were brought here to be seen, but never fully known. Even your sleep is observed. Your bedroom, the current one, the downgraded one, is modest by palace standards. The mattress is firm, the silk sheet still cool. The lanterns are extinguished at a particular hour by a servant who doesn't speak to you unless something is burning. But before they leave, they always glance. Just one glance. To make sure you're still whole. That your skin is unmarked. That your breath is even. Because damaged goods are hard to resell. You don't lock your door. There's no lock. You're not supposed to need one. Who would hurt a favoured guest of the court? Who would dare? You ask these questions into the dark, sometimes not aloud, just in the back of your throat, where real questions live. And the dark answers with silence. You wonder what would happen if you disappeared. Walked out, took off the silk, dropped the perfume and simply left. Walked into the night in bare feet, smelling like jasmine and defiance. But you wouldn't make it past the second gate, not just because of guards, because you don't know how to open a door. Not anymore. Not a real one. Your existence has been reduced to choreography. You know how to kneel on cue, how to sip tea without slurping, how to laugh like you've never heard a joke before, but absolutely honoured by it. But doors? Those are for people who expect to go places. You don't go anywhere. You're summoned, shifted, stored, even when you're given the illusion of choice. Pick a robe for the ceremony. Choose your poem for the mid-autumn recital. Would you prefer plum wine or lychee nectar tonight? You're selecting from options pre-selected for you. Curated choice. It's like someone handed you a script and said, feel free to improvise, just don't change any of the lines. So you stop choosing. You learn the rules of stillness, the sacred geometry of non-resistance. You learn how to arrange your limbs to suggest serenity, even when your stomach is clenched into knots from a conversation you weren't supposed to overhear. You learn how to hold your hands so that your fingers look relaxed and not like they're hiding tremors. You learn to dream with your eyes open, because closing them too long might be misinterpreted. And you learn, perhaps worst of all, that comfort is not safety. Comfort is a tool, a leash made of gold thread. They feed you delicacies, not because they love you, but because a well-fed bird sings prettier. They drape you in luxury not to honour your value, but to display the wealth of the person who owns you. And you accept it, because rejecting it leads to punishment. And punishment here doesn't always look like whips or chains. Sometimes it looks like removal. Not execution. That's too obvious, too messy. No, the preferred method is evaporation, a transfer, a reassignment, a posting to a faraway villa where the court no longer visits, a quiet illness that requires isolation, a letter, unsigned, telling you that you've been granted the gift of rest. And so you stay grateful, publicly. You smile like the silk on your back is stitched directly into your skin. You thank people for things you didn't ask for. You apologize for emotions you never expressed. You become the perfect resident of a palace built from illusions. And when visitors come, officials from distant provinces, foreign envoys seeking alliances, you are occasionally displayed, not always directly. Not as, this is one of our imperial concubines. No, more like a flower in a vase. A subtle presence in the corner. A figure framed by incense smoke. You are background prestige. A luxury detail in the architecture of influence. No one speaks to you, but everyone notes you. You're the story they'll tell later, after wine. Did you see the one with the eyes? Like carved obsidian. What a strange thing to keep, a man like that. They don't know your name. You're not supposed to have one, not a real one. In official documents, if you're mentioned at all, it will be as the favoured blossom, the moon-eyed one, subject numbered of 4. You stop flinching when you read it, because eventually you stop reading. There's nothing written for you. Sometimes, if you're lucky, or unlucky, you're taken out of the inner quarters. Not outside, exactly. That would imply freedom. But to other rooms. Public-facing chambers. Reception halls with floors so polished they reflect your self-doubt. corridors lined with scholars you're not supposed to speak to, officials who pretend not to see you, wives who very much do. There, you're not a person, you're a signal. Your presence says, this ruler is powerful enough to indulge in beauty. Your posture says, this is a court of sophistication, luxury, and taste. Your silence says, I am both decoration and warning. Because that's what you've become. A warning in brocade. A cautionary tale draped in lavender. To some, you represent what happens when a man becomes too soft. To others, you're proof that even masculinity can be conquered. Trimmed, perfumed, silenced. You're both spectacle and shadow, depending on who's looking. And they do look, even when they pretend not to. Even when the viziers keep their eyes on the scrolls, and the wives speak only of poetry, and the generals scoff under their breath. They see you. You float past them like a question no one wants to answer. You move with that same tragic grace they've trained into you, the kind that says, I don't walk, I am placed. And after these appearances, you are returned, not thanked, not spoken to. Just return to your quarters, like a precious object that's been momentarily taken off the shelf and then delicately dusted before being put back. You sit there, back inside the walls, and try to remember who you're supposed to be. The performance doesn't end. It never ends. You just change sets. There are nights when the halls fall quiet, when the court is asleep, and the lanterns flicker low, and the whole palace seems to exhale. These are the dangerous hours, because silence is fertile ground for memory, and memory is poison. You remember your mother's voice, the scratchy wool of your childhood tunic, the sound of chickens outside the old courtyard where you used to draw lines in the dirt with a stick. You remember laughter, real laughter, not the airy, delicate, court-trained exhale they call laughter here. You remember wanting things, and then you remember why you stopped. Because inside these walls, wanting is a liability. Wanting makes you fragile. Wanting makes you ask. And when you ask, even with your eyes, you remind them that you're human. And no one wants to be reminded that the thing they use for status has a soul. So you bury it, the memories, the longing, the hope that someone, anyone, might come sit beside you one evening and ask, are you tired? Not physically, not from walking circles around the rosewood screen, but tired of this, of being looked at but never seen, touched but never known, polished but never held. And maybe someone does, once. A servant who lingers too long with your comb. A eunuch who used to be something else. An older concubine who remembers a time before rules were carved this deep. Someone speaks to you without using their eyes like scalpels, and for a moment you feel it. Connection. Then it's gone. Because that's the rule. Attachment invites scandal. Scandal invites scrutiny. Scrutiny invites suffering. And suffering here is subtle. They don't beat you. Not unless they want to make an example of you. No, here they just take things away. They take the colour from your wardrobe, the fragrance from your bath, the second cup of tea you weren't supposed to have, but looked forward to anyway. They move your mirror. They don't say why, but now when you wake, you can't see yourself immediately. You have to look for you. It's symbolic. Everything here is symbolic. The paintings on the walls, birds in cages, tigers behind bamboo, rivers that wind in loops but never reach the sea. The poems you're asked to memorize, full of longing, parting, surrender. The music you hear at dinner, slow, minor key, notes that stretch like threads and fray at the end. Even the fabrics. You learn to read status in the weave. The tighter the pattern, the more important you are. You used to wear gold threaded gauze with chrysanthemum embossing. Now it's plain blue silk, still beautiful, just quieter. You start to forget what month it is, then what season, then what year. Time in here isn't marked by calendars, it's marked by which concubine is currently in favour, by the sequence of festivals you're allowed to attend, or not, by the age of the youngest new arrival, whose face is still round with fear, and whose voice still cracks with youth. And that's the hardest mirror of all, seeing someone new, someone fresh, fragrant, terrified, full of questions they're not allowed to ask yet. You want to warn them, to grab their hand and whisper, don't trust the smiles, don't fall in love with comfort, don't let them shrink you into silk. But you don't, because no one warned you, because you're not supposed to speak. Instead you nod at them in the courtyard one morning, just once, just enough to say, yes, I see you, I was you, good luck. Then you look away, because even kindness here can get you punished. You return to your room. You sit on the mat that no longer matches the cushions. You fold your hands into your lap and listen to the sound of the wind through the lattice work. And you wait, not for a visitor, not for a letter, not for a knock on the door. You wait for the moment when you forget to miss anything at all, because that, finally, is when you become permanent. Not as a person, but as part of the palace. A fixture, a breath woven into the wallpaper, a legend in soft footsteps, a ghost with good posture. Someone will visit this room one day after you're gone. A new resident, a new decoration. They'll admire the carvings. They'll ask who lived here before. And someone will say, oh, one of the old ones. No one remembers his name, but they say he had the most perfect silence. You don't work, not in the traditional sense. There are no crops to plant, no stone to quarry, no parchment to copy until your fingers ache, no battlefield awaiting your sacrifice. Which is exactly why everyone assumes you have it easy. And in a way you do. You don't dig trenches, you don't carry bricks, you don't bleed from the blade, but your body still breaks. It just does it more elegantly. Your work is not seen, that's the point. Your labour is silent, your pain invisible. Your exhaustion must wear perfume. Let's start with the basics. Waking. You don't wake up naturally. You surface, like something pulled from beneath the water, the moment the gong chimes from the eastern wing. Your eyes open before second note. Your body is already alert, trained by repetition and subtle threat. You sit up slowly, elegantly. You don't stretch. Stretching is vulgar. It suggests tiredness, and you're not supposed to be tired. A servant appears almost instantly, not with affection, with duty. She lays out your clothes with the precision of someone setting bait. One wrong fold and she could be dismissed, or worse, reassigned to somewhere no one comes back from. You wash with cool water. Always cool. Warm water makes the skin pink, which is apparently common. You pat yourself dry with cloths so fine they feel imaginary. But you don't enjoy the softness. That's not the point. The softness is the standard, expected. The moment you notice it, you're reminded of how little in your life you actually own. Next, grooming. You are brushed, combed, dabbed, scrubbed, threaded, oiled, tweezed. Everything unnecessary is removed. Hair, odour, roughness, emotion. Your eyebrows are shaped. Your fingernails checked. Your ears cleaned with terrifying delicacy. One time, your heel cracked from walking barefoot in winter. Just one crack. A tiny thing. Barely noticeable. The next morning you weren't summoned. The morning after that, your shoes were taken away for review. The following week, you were reassigned to the end of the tea line, behind the newer arrivals, behind even the boy who once sneezed during a recital. It took 3 weeks, 2 rounds of herbal balm, and a perfectly recited poem before your position was quietly restored. So, yes, you take the heel balm seriously now. After grooming comes wardrobe. The clothes are chosen for you, always. You're not allowed to choose colour, only mood, and even that is interpreted by someone else. You feel anxious? Then you are dressed in calming tones. You feel confident? Then you are dressed in contrast. You feel nothing. Perfect. That's ideal. Once dressed, you are displayed. Not in a literal cage, of course. This is high society. The cages are metaphorical, made of silk and subtle expectations. You are positioned in the garden, or the reading room, or the eastern corridor, depending on which guests are visiting. You don't speak. You radiate. That's your job. You're a lamp, not a voice. A breeze, not a storm. The soft presence that makes people feel powerful just by occupying the same room. And it's exhausting. Holding a posture for hours. Smiling just enough. Maintaining a gaze that's both interested and disinterested. Listening to conversations you're not part of. Keeping your face still while someone laughs at a joke about your role, your gender, your usefulness. You nod when expected. You blink softly when spoken to. You exit the room precisely 3 steps behind the person you're following, never more, never less. This is labour, the labour of invisibility, of perfection, of never letting your own emotions rise too high or drop too low. You must hover at a consistent altitude of pleasant mystery. At meals, you eat second. Never first, never last. Second is safest. First is presumptuous. Last is pitiful. You take small bites. You chew slowly. You never finish a plate. Finishing implies hunger, and hunger implies lack, and lack implies need. And concubines must never need anything. Need is dangerous. It makes people think you want, and want is a gateway to rebellion. So you sip delicately, you compliment things you didn't taste, you smile like someone just brushed your soul lightly with a feather. This takes energy, so much energy. More than farming, more than fighting. Because farming lets you grunt. Fighting lets you scream. This smiling, this subtle surviving, gives you no release. You don't sweat in public, you don't cry, you don't sigh unless it's poetic. Your suffering must be aesthetic. The strange thing is, most people don't think you do anything. Not really. They look at your soft hands and your still posture, and they think, ah, how lucky. He just lounges all day, sips plum wine, wears silk. What a life. But here's the truth. The lounging is choreographed, the sipping is timed, the silk itches. You don't rest. You pose. And posing for hours, days, years is work. Quiet work, uncredited work, the kind of work that leaves no calluses, only bruises on the soul. Your job is to be wanted. That's the assignment. That's the entire position description. Be desirable. Be beautiful. Be exactly what someone else needs you to be, even if it breaks you. And what people don't understand is that being wanted isn't the same as being loved. Being wanted is passive. One-directional. You are the object, not the subject. The prize, not the player. The apple, not the hand. So you train yourself. Learn not in swordplay, not in math. In appeal. You train in walking. Not too fast. Not too slow. Feet must glide. Not slap. You train in laughter. Enough to be sweet. Never enough to overshadow. You train in gaze. Your eyes must say, I see you. But never, I challenge you, you train in flattery. But it must never sound like flattery. It must sound like awe. Genuine, effortless awe. You train in silence. Because sometimes silence is the loudest kind of invitation. And all of this, every flutter of a fan, every tilt of your neck, every sigh you exhale like incense, is scored and measured. You are being evaluated, constantly, not officially. No one hands out performance reviews, but the system has its own way of ranking you. Who got summoned last night? Who received a silk rose on the Festival of Birds? Who was offered the last preserved plum from the imperial pantry? You learn to read status in fragments, in the angle of a bow, the flavour of your tea, whether your bath water is jasmine or just plain. And that status is a full-time job to maintain, because it fluctuates daily. You can be the favourite on Tuesday and completely irrelevant by Friday. You can receive a poem written in your honour, then be forgotten because someone newer sang better at breakfast. And when your status dips, even slightly, the shift is immediate. The attendants grow colder. The gifts disappear. Your hair isn't brushed quite as long. Your robe smells faintly of dust. No one says anything, but everyone knows. The performance is slipping, so you redouble your efforts. You fast for 3 days to shrink your face slightly, highlight your cheekbones. You memorize new lines of poetry to quote during evening walks. You learn how to play an instrument you hate because someone mentioned once, in passing, that music soothes him. You twist yourself into someone else's idea of divine. And still, it might not be enough, because sometimes you're not being replaced. You're just being neglected. And that's harder, because if you're replaced, at least there's a story, a reason, something to hate. But if you're just forgotten, if attention simply drifts like fog rolling over a field, there's nothing to fight. No villain, no betrayal, just absence. And absence is the worst kind of labour. Because now your job becomes waiting. Waiting to be noticed again. Waiting for a glance, a hand, a word. Waiting for the next summons that might never come. You start to second guess everything. Was your tone too bright? Did you laugh too hard? Was that rose-scented sachet too forward? Should you have worn blue instead of green at the spring equinox? You lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, re-editing the version of yourself you offered today, hoping tomorrow you can do better. Be softer, be quieter, be more sparkly. This is your labour. You are a walking resume of yearning. And yes, sometimes your work includes that, the bed, the chamber, the shared silence of bodies pretending not to be sad. And even that, the thing outsiders always assume is the job, is just another performance. You're not there for pleasure. Not yours anyway. You're not there for connection, even if they call it that. You're there to complete a scene, to be looked at, touched, admired. You are skin with a role. You learn how to breathe at the right tempo, when to arch your neck, when to hold still, when to whisper something reassuring that makes the other person feel like they are powerful, special, chosen. And afterward, you don't expect to be held. You rise when told. You leave when dismissed. You walk back through the corridor where the lamps flicker like sighs, and you sit in your room in silence, trying to remember where your self ends and the role begins. Some nights you cry, but even that is quiet. You cry with your mouth closed into a sleeve you'll burn the next day. No one can know. Tears here are not currency. They are a liability, a stain on the silk. Eventually, You start to forget what it means to be effortless. Because that's what they always say about you, isn't it? You're so graceful. You're naturally charming. You make it look easy. Easy. That word scratches. Because none of this is easy. None of this was ever natural. Your poise is practiced. Your smile rehearsed. Your entire body aches from the weight of pretending not to ache. Even desire, the thing you're supposed to embody, becomes part of the script. You are not allowed to want. You are required to be wanted. It's not the same. It's never the same. Because being wanted in this world is performance. It means you've studied the way his eyes shift when he's bored. You know the difference between his distracted sigh and his interested one. You know when to brush your fingers across his wrist, when to pause before pouring tea, when to pretend to blush even though your blood's been too tired to rush for months. You know how to tilt your face just enough in candlelight so the shadows do the rest. You know how to lower your voice without sounding seductive or sullen. You know how to make the space around you feel like a secret. And sometimes it works. Sometimes you are summoned again. And you think, I've done it. I'm wanted. I'm needed. But it doesn't feel good. Not like you thought it would. Because being wanted isn't the same as being seen. Because when he reaches for you, it's not you he's reaching for. It's the idea of you, the thing he made up, the dream you became. And in that moment, as his hands trace the edge of your jaw like a possession being checked for damage, something inside you folds. Quietly, permanently. You realise you no longer know what you like, not what you enjoy, what you like. Do you like sweet things you don't remember? Do you like music? Which kind? Do you prefer warm baths or cold ones? These were questions you used to be able to answer. Now they feel like riddles, because your preferences stopped mattering the day they started assigning them to you. You like jasmine, because he once said it smelled calming. You like poetry, because your voice carries well when reciting. You like the rain, because it makes you look more fragile when you stare out the window. You like what you're told to like, and eventually the old likes, the real ones, begin to rot in the back of your brain. And this is the real labour. Not the grooming, not the standing still for hours, not the memorising of etiquette and history and 10,000 names you'll never use. No, the real work is disappearing from yourself, slowly, quietly, with grace, because breaking is unacceptable. Breaking would mean someone has to see you, and they can't. They need you beautiful. They need you composed. They need you to float, to shimmer, to sigh in the right key at the right time. They need you to be okay. So, you are. You walk. You breathe. You smile. You say yes, when you mean, I don't know anymore. You say thank you when you're given less than scraps. You say it's lovely when someone puts their hands on you like you're made of marble instead of meat. And the hardest part, you start believing it. You start believing this is who you were always meant to be. That maybe you were never a whole person to begin with. That maybe your only real gift was being shaped into something someone else could love. And that lie, is the heaviest thing you carry. It shows up in your sleep. In dreams where you're naked, not in the sexual way, but in the vulnerable way. Naked and unposed, knees bent, hair messy, mouth open, laughing at something stupid. And there's no one watching, no one needing, no one grading you, just you. And you wake up terrified, because that version of you, that version couldn't survive here. He'd get you punished, or replaced, or quietly reassigned to a room with no windows and no mirrors and no more assignments. So you smother him, gently, lovingly, like an old pet that got too loud. And then you rise, you bathe, you smile, you float. Because this is the labour. This is the cost of being beautiful in a system that eats beauty for breakfast and spits out silk. This is how you survive. You'd think the hard part is being owned. It's not. The hard part is being ranked. Because once you've been claimed, once you're within the walls and under the silk and fed by gold spoons you're not allowed to touch, your life becomes a math equation. A shifting formula of beauty, favour, whispers and rumours. You are measured constantly, but never told the score. There is a hierarchy here. Of course there is. The palace runs on it. The harem breathes it. It curls through the halls like incense that's been laced with venom. At the top, naturally, is the emperor, or sultan, or caliph, or king, depending on which language humiliation is being spoken in. His preferences aren't just personal, they're law. They form the gravitational centre of the universe. What he wants is, right below him, the wives. Yes, plural. Don't look surprised. No one here believes in monogamy. Not when power is at stake. The wives hold official rank. Their marriages are tools. Treaties in silk. Bargains stitched with bridal veils. Each wife brings land, wealth, or an army in her dowry. They don't always love him. He rarely loves them. That's not the point. They sit on thrones built of politics. You, on the other hand, are not on any throne. You are furniture. Below the wives are the consorts. Technically not married, technically favoured companions. But everyone knows what that means. They're the women who have been chosen repeatedly. Enough to be elevated, enough to be feared, and under them, the concubines, which is where you live. You're part of the lower firmament, not celestial bodies, but satellites. Not stars, but mirrors angled toward the sun. And among concubines there's a second ranking system. One the court pretends doesn't exist. Looks. Not beauty, mind you. Looks. Beauty is abstract. Spiritual. Vague. Looks are measurable. Looks are weaponized. Looks are everything. There's the boy with the almond eyes and skin so clear you can read jealousy on it. He's currently ranked third, unofficially. Everyone knows it. No one says it. There's the one who can play the zither without ever glancing at his hands. He's fourth, but only because he's developing a wrinkle at the corner of his mouth. And then there's the favourite. You've seen him. Or rather, you've seen what's left of him. Because that's the secret. Being at the top of this invisible pyramid doesn't mean you're powerful. It means you're breakable. The favourite is watched the most, touched the most, summoned the most, judged the most. He floats like mist, speaks like a psalm, smiles like he's never once felt bitterness. But you've seen his hands shake when he thinks no one's looking. Because being on top of this hierarchy doesn't mean you're safe. It means you're more fragile, more exposed. You get the best food, but you eat it alone. You wear the most expensive silk, but every thread is stitched with pressure. You sleep on feather-stuffed mattresses, but with eyes wide open. And if you slip, if you age, if a new face arrives with cheekbones sharper than your political instincts, you don't fall gracefully. You plummet. You become cautionary. Everyone watches your descent like a prophecy. They lower their gaze in the halls. They speak your name only in metaphors. They quote your favourite poems in the past tense. And no one helps you. Because hierarchy doesn't reward kindness. It punishes association. So when you slip alone. The new favourites learn to step around you. The old friends stop sitting near you. The attendants switch out your robes for ones with slightly frayed edges. The message is clear. You are fading. And fading here is a form of execution. Not of the body, of the self. You still breathe, still eat, still bathe, but you are dismissed from visibility. And visibility is survival. In this palace, the rules of hierarchy are never written down. That would be too honest, too concrete. And hierarchy here must feel like air, invisible, suffocating, and always shifting. Everyone knows the rankings, but no one will say them aloud. That's what makes it cruel. You could ask, who is favoured? But the answer won't come in words, it comes in glances. Who gets the freshest fruit? Who receives the folded note in the morning? Who is placed closest to the dais during recitals, where their sighs can float up into royal ears? It's choreography, power by proximity. If you're near the ruler's cushion, you're near the top. If you're on the floor, in the back, blocked by a decorative fern, you're fading. And the others see it. Because the concubines? They are your peers, your rivals, your mirrors. They are the ones who will comfort you with one hand and sabotage you with the other. They don't hate you. Not really. Hatred would be too loud, too warm. They envy you, and fear you, and study you like they're preparing to be you. Every smile in the hall is rehearsed. Every compliment has an aftertaste. Every act of kindness is a move in a game where the winner gets to exist for another season. You know the ones to watch. The ones who are always silent at just the right time. The ones who never eat more than 3 bites. The ones who cry once a month. Just enough to seem delicate, but never unstable. They are playing to stay. And the ones who don't play? The ones who get tired, get clumsy, forget to bow at the precise angle? They disappear. Not literally, that's too messy. No, they're reassigned to minor quarters, given duties that sound noble but are really exile. Assisting the embroidery mistress, reading to the young princes, overseeing the fragrance garden, which all sound lovely until you realise they're just far enough away, far enough that no one sees them, far enough that no one remembers, and the worst part, you still see them. You see them walking the long corridor outside the east wing. You see them lingering by the garden gate, pretending to admire the orchids. You see them dressed in slightly faded silk, still bowing too politely, still hoping. You nod to them, if you're brave. You look away, if you want to survive. Because mercy here is dangerous. If you show too much sympathy for someone falling in rank, people begin to whisper that you're falling with them, that your alliance is contagious, that your pity is weakness, that your softness will get you reassigned to the same dusty wing with the peeling lanterns and the slightly sour tea. So you smile, you nod to the favourites, you praise the rising stars, you keep your distance from the faded, and you feel the guilt bloom inside you like a bruise. But guilt is not survival. Performance is. And part of that performance is pretending you're not hurt. When you're corrected in front of others, you don't flinch. When your name is skipped at morning call, you don't blink. When your robe is swapped for one a shade less vibrant, you say thank you. Humiliation here is precise. It's not about spectacle. It's about erosion. You're not scolded. You're excluded. From performances, from conversations, from being looked at directly. The ruler walks by you and doesn't see you. A eunuch hands out poems, and your scroll is missing. A banquet is called, and you are not seated. And somehow this hurts more than being slapped. Because at least a slap is recognition. At least punishment is attention. But neglect, that's the slow death. It tells you that your name has lost weight, that your face no longer sparks memory, that your presence has shifted from desirable to background noise, and there is no ceremony for it, no warning bell, no dismissal letter, just silence. And silence in this place is never quiet. Of course, it's not enough to obey, not here. Obedience is expected. You must obey, and make it look like worship. You must follow orders like they were favours. You must suffer like it's a privilege. That's the most humiliating part. Not the bowing, not the silence, not even the waiting. It's the gratitude, the required gratitude. You're expected to be thankful for everything, for anything, even for nothing, especially for nothing. If you are overlooked, thank them for their attention. If your poem is ignored, thank them for listening. If you are not summoned, thank them for the rest. And if you are summoned, if you are chosen, you thank them like they saved your life. Because in a way, they did. For one more night, one more day, one more flicker of relevance. And so you smile, even when you're exhausted, even when you feel nothing, even when you secretly hoped you wouldn't be picked tonight. You smile like it's the highest honour a body could be given, to be noticed. Because they have trained you to believe that being used is a form of worth. They've trained you to see silence as a compliment, to interpret neglect as mercy, to accept fading as part of the cycle. And what happens when you break? When you can't smile anymore? You don't scream. You don't throw things. You don't cry in the hall. You just drift. You speak less. You move slower. You stop glancing at the mirrors. You no longer rise quite as quickly when someone enters the room. And they notice. Not because they care, but because deviation is dangerous. Suddenly, the attendants arrive more often. They bring new perfumes. They suggest new poses. They whisper encouragement with wide, anxious eyes. Because your unravelling threatens the illusion. An illusion here is sacred. If you unravel too much, too visibly, you are removed. Not punished, removed from the schedule, from the conversation, from the frame. Someone else replaces you. Someone whose smile hasn't yet cracked. Someone whose body still responds when touched. Someone who still thinks being chosen means something. And you? You are sent to rest. That's the phrase they use. To rest. A polite death. You don't argue. Arguing would confirm their suspicions. That you remember what you were before. That you know what's happening. And knowledge here is dangerous. Too much of it makes you difficult to manage. So you nod. You bow. You disappear. Some come back. Months later, repainted and reprogrammed, with a new name and slightly stiffer smiles. But they're never quite the same. There's a tremble at the corners of their silence. There's a distance behind their eyes. Like they're still wandering the corridor when no one came looking. And some don't return. They are given new roles, sent to remote villas, assigned to assist with ceremonial duties in provinces that conveniently forget to send updates. Others are quietly married off, not for love, but as a solution. Imagine it, spending years learning to be the perfect echo of someone else's desire, only to be handed to a mid-level official who wanted a title boost. You, once a centerpiece of the inner court, now pouring tea for a man who doesn't understand what it cost you to sit this still, and yet you pour, because by then you've forgotten how not to. This is the cruelty of the hierarchy. It doesn't destroy you with violence. It destroys you with discipline, with small daily humiliations dressed as etiquette. with rules you were never allowed to question, with a rank that lives inside your bones long after the palace forgets your name. And perhaps, worst of all, you start to enforce it yourself. You correct the younger ones. You roll your eyes when someone bows one beat too late. You whisper warnings that sound like kindness. Don't speak at dinner unless spoken to. Don't show too much ankle during the walk past the terrace. Don't ever refuse the orange robe when it's offered. It's a test. You repeat the rules that broke you, because breaking others feels like control. Because watching someone else fall is the only way to believe you're still upright. And yet, somewhere in you, there is a small stubborn voice, buried under years of protocol and powder and poems you never liked. A voice that remembers what it felt like to be unranked, to be just a person. That voice does not speak often. It knows better. But some nights it hums, quietly, like a song from a life before titles, before silence was beautiful, before gratitude was required. And on those nights, you remember that the palace may own your posture. It may own your routine, your breath, your ranking, but it will never own that voice. It's too soft to be punished, too quiet to be assigned, too small to be ranked. But it's yours. And in this world, even the tiniest, most trembling truth is an act of rebellion. The palace doesn't just own your body, it owns your mind. Not with whips, not with shackles, with music, with parables, with verses brushed in gold. Control here doesn't arrive with violence, it arrives with beauty. The walls are painted with stories, legends of divine love, of kings chosen by heaven, of loyal companions who never ask for more than a glance. Every hallway hums with teachings, poems hung beside doors like soft warnings, sutras carved into the garden stones, maxims painted in red above your bed. Obedience brings peace. Desire is a fire that devours the self. Grace lies in stillness. You read these every morning, not because you want to, because they are everywhere. You don't memorize them. They infiltrate you. They become your inner voice, your reflex, your instinct to kneel before you even understand why. And then there's the music. Oh, the music. Played at every ceremony, every seasonal rite, every banquet where you must float across the room like a painted cloud. Flutes that sound like morning birds. Drums that beat so soft they feel like a heartbeat you don't own. Lutes plucked with strings of silk, because even sound must be dressed here. The songs are never joyful, not truly. They are gentle, longing, reverent. They teach you to move slower, to breathe softer, to sit with your hands folded like a prayer you'll never finish. And in those moments, surrounded by incense, silver bowls and solemn faces, you start to believe it. That suffering is beautiful. That silence is grace. That devotion is best shown through disappearance. You're not told these things outright. No one comes to your chamber and says, you must erase yourself for the sake of the empire. They don't have to. The culture tells you. The art tells you. The gods, or the idea of them, tell you. Because even belief is engineered here. Even faith wears royal seals. You are taken to temple once a week. Not to pray, to display piety. The shrine is golden. The priest's robes shimmer. And you kneel on cold stone while he chants verses you've heard 100 times. To serve without question is to be closer to heaven. To give your beauty to the ruler is to honour the divine. Desire not for yourself, but for the greater order. And you nod. Because what else can you do? Say, no thank you? I'd rather reclaim my soul. They'd smile, escort you back, and double the incense in your chamber until your lungs no longer feel like your own. This is not religion. This is architecture. A structure built to keep you from reaching the ceiling of your own thoughts. Even the books you're allowed to read, curated. Histories of loyal servants, tales of martyrs, poetry about stars that burn quietly beside greater suns. Never revolution, never refusal, never escape. Court poets know better. They don't write about freedom. They write about restraint. They don't praise love, they praise longing. The kind of longing that never speaks, that waits, that fades beautifully when it goes unanswered. And you start to internalize it. You begin to believe that your ache is virtue, that your silence is holy, that your suffering makes you more worthy. Worthy of what? You don't know. You stopped asking. Long ago, one day, a scholar visits the palace. He's old, soft-spoken, his beard like river mist, his scrolls bound in polished horn. He's famous, you're told. A philosopher, a thinker, a man who once debated emperors in their own throne rooms. He's here to lecture, not to the ruler, not to the generals, to you, the concubines, not because he sees you as students, but because he sees you as vessels of discipline, of refinement, of what he calls cosmic virtue. You kneel on silk cushions as he speaks. You listen, and what you hear is beautiful. His words flow like honey mixed with snowmelt. He speaks of order, of harmony, of the delicate balance between duty and desire. He says, in the empire of the body, the heart is the emperor, but even the emperor must rest. That is where beauty comes in, to hold stillness, to cradle chaos, to remind power that softness is not weakness, but wisdom. He speaks of yielding like it's water, of silence like it's truth, of surrender as the most dignified kind of strength. He looks at you, directly, gently, and says, the most powerful man in the world cannot rule his own desire, but you steady it. That is nobility. And everyone bows, even you, because for a moment you believe him, because it feels true, because it sounds noble, because it makes your pain into a philosophy, a way of being, not just something that happened to you. And that's the trap. Culture here isn't just control, it's comfort. It takes your suffering and wraps it in metaphor, turns your fear into elegance, turns your humiliation into enlightenment, and you fall for it. Because what's the alternative? To admit this is meaningless? That your silence isn't grace, it's silence. That your smile isn't spiritual, it's fear. That you don't stand for balance or beauty or cosmic wisdom. That you're just trapped? No, that's too much. Too heavy. Too loud for the stillness you've trained into your bones. So instead, you light the incense. You recite the verses. You quote the scholar who told you that surrender is the highest form of power. And slowly, belief settles into you like dust in the corners of your mind. You don't just obey, you agree. That's the final act of domination. You thank the cage for its structure. You thank the lock for keeping you safe. You thank the system for giving you a name, a title, a role, even if it's one that erases you. You begin to use the language of your captors. When someone falters, you say they've lost their centre. When someone cries, you call it imbalance. When someone disappears, you say they've returned to stillness. And no one questions it, because language here is ritual. And ritual is belief in costume. And that belief goes all the way to the stars, literally. You are taught that the heavens mirror the palace, that the emperor is the sun, that his wives are planets, orbiting him in elegant, preordained paths, that you, the concubines, are the stars. Distant, quiet, beautiful only in clusters. You're told, the stars do not seek the sun's gaze. They shine in service. Which is a poetic way of saying you are made to be ignored. And somehow that makes you feel important. Because at least the stars matter. Even if only as background. So now, when you walk the palace at night and see your reflection in the lantern light, you don't think, I am unseen. You think, I am part of the design. You start dreaming in script, not stories, not feelings. Script, formatted prayers, elegant lines, lines you've recited so often your subconscious folds them into your sleep. You dream of kneeling, not because your knees ache, but because that's what dreams are supposed to look like. You dream of incense rising from your own mouth. You dream of your hands folded in permanent stillness while a voice, not yours, reads your thoughts aloud in verses approved by the High Court. You wake up with a taste of temple dust on your tongue, and you don't scream, because screaming is not part of the ritual. Ritual, in fact, is your entire life now. It fills the hours like honey poured over an open wound, sticky, golden, and slowly smothering. There's a ritual for waking, for eating, for bathing, for entering a room you've already been in 1,000 times. You can't even pick up a teacup without reciting the proper movement. Left hand supporting, right hand lifting, elbow curved like the moon in winter, wrist relaxed but never limp, fingers quiet but aware of their shape. This is not a teacup. This is ceremony, and it applies to everything. Laughter must be quiet. Crying must be private. If you're angry, it must be poetic. If you're sad, it must be beautiful. And if you're happy, truly happy, you must be careful. Because joy here is suspicious. Joy means you've forgotten your role. Joy means you've drifted. Joy is a symptom of resistance. So your happiness, like everything else, must be formalized, presented, framed, draped in obedience. You laugh only when prompted. You smile only when watched. You walk through the courtyard and pretend the wind itself is sacred. Because everything you touch must be reverent, or the system phrase. Even loneliness becomes liturgical. You're alone? Good. Reflect. You miss someone? Perfect. Longing is the highest form of love. You feel forgotten? Then remember. The moon is also hidden half the time, and still revered. You learn to speak in metaphors, even when your chest is cracking open. You say, the blossom wilts, but the branch remains. When you mean, I am so tired I can barely breathe. You say, I walk where the quiet guides me. When you mean, I have no idea who I am anymore. You say, I am honoured to serve. When you mean, please, someone notice that I still exist. But no one corrects you, because you're fluent now, in the language of acceptable suffering. You speak devotion like you were born with it in your mouth, even though it was placed there, carefully, daily, by priests who call obedience a virtue, by poets who call longing divine, by teachers who say the stars envy your discipline, by the concubines around you, who repeat the same lies because they're too exhausted to invent new ones. And maybe that's the worst part. It's not that you're forced to lie, it's that you've made the lie your home. It's warm here, it's quiet, it's safe. You no longer dream of escape, not because you've accepted your fate, but because you've forgotten there was a before. You only remember it in flickers. The smell of rain on dirt that wasn't imported. The feeling of laughing too loud. The sound of your own name spoken without ceremony. And then you blink, and it's gone. The incense chokes the memory. The ceremony drowns the rebellion. The poetry erases the scream before you even form it. And so, when you kneel in temple, again, and listen to the priest speak of balance and selflessness and the beauty of quiet men, you nod, because you believe him now. Not because he's right, but because belief has become survival. And doubt, real doubt, is a luxury reserved for people who still remember what it felt like to be free. You remember, vaguely, like a dream, like a name scratched into water. But it's fading. You're no longer sure which parts of you were ever real, which thoughts are yours, which prayers are performances, which tears you actually meant, because culture has swallowed you whole, and you didn't even bite back. There's something strange about a world that never says no to beauty. At first it feels flattering, like being worshipped, like living in a temple where you are both the idol and the incense. You are told you're perfect, not once, not twice, every day, by everyone. And somewhere along the way the horror creeps in. Because perfection doesn't mean they love you. It means they don't see you. They see your skin, your posture, your fragrance, your stillness. They praise your silence like it's a virtue. They kiss your hands like you're a vase. And when something cracks, even slightly, they don't fix it. They replace it. That's the real horror of being adored here. You are not cherished. You are curated. And curation is violent, in a soft, antiseptic, bureaucratic way. Let's talk about maintenance. The part no one writes poems about. Your face is massaged with powdered pearl to retain clarity. Your teeth are scraped with ash and silk threads. Your feet are soaked in rose water so often, your toenails flake from softness. Sounds pleasant, doesn't it? Now imagine being plucked with bone tweezers by a servant who whispers prayers while you bleed, having your ears bled because an astrologer said the moon was in decline, being forbidden to blink during a beauty inspection, because blinking implies doubt. The emperor likes his concubines to be effortless, which means your effort must be invisible, which means your pain must be silent. No one wants to hear you groan while you're being scrubbed with crushed lotus seeds and cold river stones. No one wants to see the sores behind your ears where the hairpins dig into your skull. No one wants to smell the herbal poultice stuffed under your armpits because your body refused to remain fragrant after 12 hours of pretending not to sweat. So you endure it, and then you smile. Because to win here, you must be absurd. You must cry in rhythm. You must age in reverse. You must dance while starving. You must compliment the man who made you remove your own reflection from your chamber wall because it was distracting. Yes, that happened. One season a concubine was told to cover every mirror in his room. Not for modesty, not for humility, because his beauty was interfering with the aesthetic hierarchy. He had become too admired, too looked at. So they punished him with silence. They made him invisible to himself. And you know what's worse? He thanked them. Because here, you don't question absurdity. You interpret it. You bow and say, yes, of course, beauty is not for vanity. I understand now. You bow again, just in case. And still, that's not even the strangest part. Let's talk about the rituals, the secret ones, the ones no one names, but everyone knows. There is a room behind the Peach Hall. No doors. Only a curtain. Once a month, select concubines are brought in. Chosen by a silent ballot of eunuchs and astrologers, they are asked to demonstrate radiance. That's the phrase used. What happens inside? No one speaks of it. But the concubines who return are quieter. Their hair is always wet. Their eyes don't focus for hours. One was found humming into an empty teacup like it held answers. No one asks why, because everyone is afraid they'll be next, or worse, that they won't be, because not being summoned might mean you're no longer radiant. That's the horror. Even the strange things feel like status. Even punishment is dressed in ceremony. And then, of course, there's the food, not the meals. The food for you. The things they feed you. You're told it's all for your health. Herbal tonics to soften your voice. Fermented roots to balance your blood. Boiled deer tendons to firm your presence. A paste made of crushed ivory and powdered dates to brighten your aura. Do you know what aura brightening paste tastes like? Mouldy paper and regret. But you eat it because they're watching. Because they smile as they serve it. Because the eunuch says, this was sent by the imperial physician himself. So you swallow and smile and suppress the gag reflex that could cost you your station. Sometimes you vomit later, quietly, in the basin by the wall behind the screen. You wipe your mouth with the silk they left for you. They thought of everything. They always do. There's a room no one cleans. Not because it's secret, because it's sacred. The walls are lacquered black, the floor lined with crushed sandalwood. A single chair sits in the centre, not for sitting, but for watching. This is the listening room. You go there not to speak, but to be heard. Or so they say. The truth? It's a test. A eunuch sits behind the screen, recording, always recording, your tone, your pauses, your choice of words. Not for loyalty, not for scandal, for aesthetic alignment. Did your voice flutter enough when you spoke about the emperor's silk? Did your sadness sound poetic, or merely whiny? Was your reverence deep enough to echo off the black walls, or did it stop at your lips? Too much honesty, and you are marked as emotionally disruptive. Too little, and you're labelled spiritually flat. Either way, you don't get invited back. And yet, being invited back means something. It means you still matter. Even if you walk out crying, shaking, mumbling about ghosts that no one else saw, at least you were seen. That's how low the bar falls in time. You'd rather be dissected than ignored. You'd rather be absurd than irrelevant. It gets worse when love enters the picture. Or what they call love. Love here is not a feeling. It's a narrative, assigned, controlled, rewritten. One day a concubine laughs too hard at a courtier's joke, just once. The next morning he's accused of harbouring affection. By afternoon he's been reassigned. To where doesn't matter. Somewhere with no windows. Not because he loved. Because he loved wrong. Love here must be sanctioned. Ordered from the top. You may pine, you may yearn, but you must never choose. Choosing is defiance. Choosing says, I have preferences. And preferences mean you think of yourself as a person. That can't happen. So when love does appear, real love, messy love, whispered behind fans or passed in glances over shared teacups, it becomes dangerous. You meet someone. Maybe. A voice you recognise. A hand that lingers too long when adjusting your robe. A shared sigh after a bad performance. You don't talk about it. You can't. But it grows. And for a moment the palace feels bearable. Even beautiful. You think, this is mine. Then one day that person disappears. Not loudly, not cruelly, just removed. They fell out of the story. And you are warned. Not by decree, not by threat, but by being told, very politely, that your shift in aura has been noted. That you should rest. That perhaps some solitary reflection in the garden would help you find your balance again. And when you return, Hours later, days later, you can't be sure. Their name is gone from the roster. Their room reassigned. Their poems burned. And you're alone again. More alone than before. Because now you know what was possible. And what it cost. You tell no one. You nod when spoken to. You resume your tea pouring. You recite your lines. And late at night you hum their name into the curtain folds. Not because it brings them back, but because forgetting would be worse. That's how horror settles here. Not with blood, but with forgetting. With realizing that your entire life, every smile, every ritual, every bath infused with floating petals, has made you into something forgettable, something replicable, interchangeable, a pattern, a scent, a list of attributes printed on parchment and handed to a new boy who just arrived from the outer province. He has your eyes, your voice, your posture. They even gave him your robe, and when you pass him in the hall, he bows, exactly as you used to. There's a story whispered among the concubines. No one knows where it started, but everyone knows the ending. It goes like this. A boy, beautiful, quiet, trained to perfection, was once told he laughed too loudly during a procession. Not rudely, not mockingly, just too loud. It disturbed the symmetry. As punishment, they gilded his teeth. Permanently. They said it would help him remember the value of silence. He smiled less after that. But not because of the gold. Because he realized the absurdity had no bottom. You think it's fiction? Until you see a concubine sipping soup with his lips tightly closed. Always. And then you wonder. Because in this place, grotesque things are not hidden. They're dressed, decorated, absorbed into the architecture. The grotesque isn't what's punished. It's what's normalised. There's a corridor, 2 turns past the West Garden, lined with masks. Dozens of them. All identical. Smooth, pale, emotionless. You wear them during neutrality training. What is neutrality training? It's the art of removing all expression from your face. You practice until your smile feels like a scar. Until your joy and fear and sadness all land in the same deadpan expression. Because ambiguity here is desirable. It makes you elegant, unthreatening, replaceable. And when you can no longer read your own face, they tell you you've succeeded. Then there's the ritual of contrition. It's not official. It's not on any schedule, but it happens. You're summoned to a chamber lit by a single lantern. You kneel. You're asked to recite all the ways you've displeased the court, real or imagined. Most of the time, no one responds. You just speak into the dark. Some cry. Some shake. Some begin to list apologies that have nothing to do with anything. I'm sorry I looked up too quickly. I'm sorry I slept through the second bell. I'm sorry I thought of someone I wasn't supposed to. Afterward, you're allowed to leave. No punishment, no feedback. Just the knowledge that someone, somewhere, now holds your confessions like a string around your throat. And the worst part, you start to schedule your own visits. Because fear needs a place to live. And this room is the only one that pretends to listen. That's what the palace teaches you. How to package fear in protocol. You're terrified? Good. Channel it into posture. You're lonely? Excellent. Use it to purify your gaze. You're confused? Perfect. Confusion is a kind of elegance. Just never say it out loud. Never break the script. Never drop the teacup. Because the moment you do, the moment you twitch, scream, weep, or laugh in a way that isn't elegant, the system convulses. And the system must never convulse. So you perform, even when no one's watching, especially then. because they are watching, always. Through attendants who report subtle changes in your walk. Through scent testers who measure whether your oils carry grief. Through the layout of your bedding. Was it folded with intention or apathy? Everything matters. Nothing is safe. Even your dreams become part of your file. Once a month, you're asked to recount your dreams to the keeper of sleep balance. If your dream featured music, you're marked as stable. If it featured flight, they offer you grounding tonics. If it featured escape, even metaphorically, you're given a new robe and your meals are watched more closely. Escape is not a theme, it's a flaw. You tell them you dream of rivers, they nod. Rivers are fine. You don't tell them the river was red, that you were drowning in it, that you were smiling as it closed over your head. You keep that part for yourself, because some absurdities, even here, are too sacred to share. And then, of course, there's the final absurdity, awareness. The knowledge that none of this is real, that the silk is a costume, that the prayers are theatre, that your personality is just a list of traits assigned to you like roles in a bad play. And yet, you keep acting. Why? Because the script is the only thing protecting you. Because stepping off stage means being forgotten. And being forgotten, here, is worse than death. So you stay, you bow, you sing. You float through a world that pretends to love you while slowly erasing everything you were. And they call it beauty. They call it devotion. They call it peace. But you, quietly, secretly, call it what it is. Absurd. And then, as always, you smile. Because even knowing the truth can't save you. Not here. Not anymore. It doesn't happen all at once. Collapse here is quiet. No dramatic fall. No shattered vase. No scream echoing through the perfumed corridors. Just a pause. One morning, you forget your lines. Not all of them. Just a few. Just enough. You're walking the beach hall, preparing for the recitation of the spring prayer. The one you've performed a dozen times. The one that begins with, I open myself to harmony. But you stop. You can't remember what comes next. You stand still for too long. A eunuch coughs. Someone shifts. You continue, making up words that sound close enough. No one corrects you. That's what tells you it's bad. If it were a small mistake, they'd fix it. But when you begin to slip, truly slip, the machine begins to reroute around you, like a river skirting a broken stone. Later that day you find yourself staring at a spoon, not with any thought, not even with interest, just staring. The spoon is silver. It reflects your face, warped and thin and endless. You think, that's not me. You don't panic. You don't gasp. You just place the spoon down, carefully, and carry on. This is how it begins. Not with rebellion, but with resignation. You stop brushing your hair as thoroughly. You bow a second too late. You let your fingers tremble when pouring the wine. No one says anything. You're still radiant, still graceful, still harmonized. But behind the compliments, there's a shift. You feel it. The way people glance over you, not at you. The way the musicians avoid eye contact. The way your name is pronounced with just a little less weight. You're not fading. You're collapsing. But they don't say it that way. They say he seems distant. He's embracing inner stillness. He's transcending the need for attention. They make your breakdown sound like evolution, which makes it worse. You try to reverse it. You try to want again. You smile brighter. You bathe twice. You rehearse old poems in your room until your voice cracks. But the spark's gone, and you realise It wasn't taken. You gave it away, piece by piece. Every time you chose safety over truth, elegance over honesty, stillness over screaming. Now, there's nothing left to give. You sit in the garden and listen to the birds that aren't allowed to fly. Their wings are clipped, not cruelly, carefully, aesthetically. So they sing. You feel like them. Perched, pretty, reduced. You want to cry, but tears feel too loud. Even now, you can't break form. So instead, you go still. Stillness is acceptable. Stillness is rewarded. Stillness is what they always wanted from you. And now you have nothing else left to offer. It starts with your pillow. You've had the same one since you arrived. Light, fragrant with pressed osmanthus, just the right shape to support the curve of your neck during meditation. One morning it's gone. No explanation, no replacement, just gone. You think maybe it was taken for cleaning. Maybe someone made a mistake. You ask. A eunuch bows, smiles, says, "A new one will arrive soon." But it never does. Instead they bring a folded cloth. Rougher, colourless, functional. You don't ask again. The next day your shoes don't fit. They're too tight across the toes. Not the embroidered ones you were given for summer. These are simpler, stiffer, like they were meant for someone else. You say nothing. At breakfast, your tray is missing the usual sliced melon. No honey tea. Just warm barley water and a single boiled plum. You eat in silence. Not because you're afraid to speak, because you already know the answer. They don't tell you when it begins. They just stop maintaining the illusion. It's not punishment, it's transition. You're not being scolded, you're being repositioned. Like a statue, they have decided to move further into the garden. Out of sight, but still technically part of the decor. The attendants start using different language. They no longer say prepare him, they say see to him. You're no longer summoned, you're informed. You begin to miss rehearsals. Not because you weren't invited, because they no longer tell you when they happen. When you ask, they apologise. So politely. So professionally. "Oh, we thought you were resting. We were told your chamber was being cleaned. The programme was revised last minute. I'm sure you understand." Of course, you do understand. You're being eased out. You're not dismissed. You're dimmed. Not exiled. Just dialed down. At first, it feels like a break. A chance to breathe. You sleep longer. No early recitations. No fire hands massaging tiger balm into your ribs before dawn. You're allowed to rest. But it doesn't feel restful. It feels like drifting. And everyone else can feel it too. They start speaking over you during conversation. Not out of cruelty, just habit. You used to hold the circle. Now your voice barely registers. When the emperor passes through the garden, you bow. He doesn't glance your way. The favourite does, briefly, with pity. And that hurts more than being ignored. Because pity means they see you. They just know you're no longer useful. And once you're not useful, you're not interesting. And once you're not interesting, well, you might as well be part of the floor tiles. When did it happen? You can't name the exact moment. Was it the day you dropped the brush during calligraphy? The day your wrist trembled during the silk ribbon dance? The day you smiled too late and no one noticed? It doesn't matter. The result is the same. You're still here, still beautiful, still trained, but no longer essential. And that is the deepest cut of all. Not rejection, obsolescence. The first time you're told your name has been moved, it's not a punishment. It's administrative. You're standing outside the perfumery room waiting for your assignment scroll. The attendant hands you the slip, bows, and says, "You're on the dusk rotation now. In a quarter." Dusk. In a quarter. You say thank you. You don't know what that means. But the way he won't meet your eyes tells you everything. No more evening recitations. No more poetry dinners. No more chance to be seen as the sun goes down. Dusk rotation means you're part of the background now. Soft-footed, candlelit, silent, they still dress you, still bathe you, still coat your arms in rose oil and brush your collarbone with crushed amber. But no one asks you anything anymore. They don't ask your opinion on the music. They don't ask which fan matches your robe. They don't even ask if you're ready. They just open the door and you walk. You are placed near pillars, next to plants, near enough to hear conversations, far enough that no one will ever turn to include you in them. You listen to laughter you used to be part of, to compliments you used to receive, to stories that once featured you, now told as if you're already gone. And in a way you are. They stop using your full name, the attendants shorten it, then shorten it again. Then they don't say it at all. They tap your shoulder when they need something. They nod when it's time to move. It's not cruel. It's worse. It's cordial. You're still given clean robes. Still served meals on porcelain. Still handed warm towels scented with mint and lemon bark. But everything you're given is generic. The robes are the same shade every day. The meals never vary. The towels are folded precisely, without the embroidered initials you used to receive. You ask once about the embroidery. The eunuch smiles. A tight, tired smile. There were changes in the laundry schedule, he says. That's all. And you don't ask again. Not when your comb is replaced with a plainer one. Not when your slippers are a half size off. Not when your chamber light no longer flickers on at dawn. Because the sensor now belongs to someone else's shift. You don't complain. You adjust. You grow quiet. Because complaint implies you expect correction. And by now, you've learned, correction only comes for the still relevant. One day you wake up and your door is already open, not unlocked, open. You step outside and realise the guards are gone. No one's watching. It should feel like freedom. It doesn't. It feels like you're no longer a part of the system. Because the system only watches what it cares about. The system only guards what's valuable. You walk the corridor slowly. No one stops you. No one nods. No one even notices. You pass a mirror. It's dusty. And for the first time in weeks, you look. Really look. Your face is the same. More or less. The lines are there, faint but growing. Your eyes look still. Not peaceful. Not sad. Just still. Like the water in the reflection pool before it's stirred. You turn away. That evening, your assignment arrives. It's brief. One line. You will assist with textile inventory in the southern corridor. Effective immediately. Inventory. You, who once danced on mosaic stages. Who recited celestial poetry at twilight dinners. Who was once described by a princess as the breath between verses. Now assigned to count bolts of cloth. You fold the scroll, set it down, and go. No fight, no protest, no, what does this mean? Because you know exactly what it means. You're still here, still dressed, still functioning. But your name is gone. Your purpose has shifted. You're no longer watched. You're no longer part of the story. And that, quietly, precisely, is how it ends. Not with exile, not with scandal, not even with cruelty, just with a closed door, a quiet hallway and a job no one else wanted. You begin folding cloth, and the palace moves on. The corridor is quiet. Too quiet. Your footsteps no longer echo. There are no bells, no music. The doors are all closed, not locked, just uninterested. You pass a column where your name used to hang, carved on a slip of sandalwood. It's bare now. The wood's been polished over. Smooth. Blank. A servant passes you. Younger. Silk, still stiff. Eyes too bright. He nods, but not out of respect. He thinks you're an attendant. You nod back. You keep walking. The hallway narrows. Somewhere a wind chime stirs and out of place like a bird in a library. You step into your new chamber. It smells of paper and starch. A single robe hangs on the rack. No colour, no pattern. You light the lantern. It flickers. You sit. Your knees ache, but no one notices. And in the silence, you hear the palace breathing. Not loud, not alive. Just continuing. With or without you. And outside, the moon rises over a garden you're no longer allowed to walk in. But that's all right. There's nothing left to bloom.